Hello everybody and welcome to the CEM and GL Block 2 Week 5 Maths lesson. I should just write that in. CEM and GLA. Now, this maths lesson, a bit of an unusual one, obviously it's on week 5. Were we in the centres, this lesson will be very much spent doing the assessment, but we feel we can offer a lot of value by sending this assessment home with you for you to complete during this week as you would normally a homework, and then carrying on and doing some of the slightly more difficult, slightly more challenging topics that we know can come up. Now, we'll probably revisit both the percentages and ratio questions that we're going to just briefly touch on here. We'll revisit them again in block 4, which is the next mathematics block. But it's nice to get a little bit of a head start now and certainly go through some of the basics. I'm going to be talking through ratio, then percentages, and then we're going to practice quite a few percentage questions and some mixed questions at the end. But this is just a nice little primer and a really nice opportunity to really just go through and get some more maths involved. So the book that we'll be looking at will be this one here, the numerical ability for CEM. But before you worry about what page number and get that out, actually, I would just like you to please get out a jotter book or some paper and really just sort of copy along with me because we're going to talk through some key concepts about ratio questions. We're going to do an example ratio question, and then we're going to talk about some key concepts for percentages and put those into practice. So just something that you can write on, something you can join in, make notes. The Teacher Write Jotter book is absolutely perfect for this. Would be amazing. So, starting with ratio, I just want to talk you through very quickly an example of how we simplify ratios, and you'll find they're very like fractions, and then an example question of how we share things in a ratio or how we split things in a ratio, or ratio of amounts is another way of saying that. So, simplifying first. Funnily enough, the first thing I think about when I'm simplifying ratios is actually fractions, because fractions are a thing that I also simplify. And I'm quite good at simplifying fractions, and I'm sure many of you are as well. So let's just quickly remind ourselves of how it works with fractions, and we'll see if we can apply some of that logic to how it works with ratios. So if I give myself a simple fraction, so let's do 4 over 10. This is something I know that can be simplified. How would I simplify it? Well, the rule is I look for a number that I can divide both numbers by. We call those a factor. And ideally, I want to try and find the highest factor possible because that's going to reduce the number of steps I have to make. And luckily, nice and simple, I can see that I can divide 4 by 2 and 10 by 2. So if I divide both top and bottom by 2, I'm going to end up with a new ratio. And in this case, it's 2 over 5. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to check to make sure 2, 5, can I divide that by anything more? Well, I can divide it by 1, that won't change it. Nope, I'm done. I've fully simplified my answer. So that's fractions, and I know many people are familiar with those, they study them. Well, ratio questions work almost exactly the same way. So if you look here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the same numbers and say, well, now I've got the ratio of 4 to 10, rather than 4 over 10. That makes it a ratio. And I'm going to simplify it the same way. I'm going to find a number that I can divide them both by, which is 2, we worked that earlier. And I'm going to divide them both by 2. And then underneath, 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. And hopefully what this shows you is that the ratio of 4 to 10 simplifies or is equivalent to the ratio 2 to 5. And it works exactly the same way. And I find that by just showing people this, showing them next to each other, color coding, you can see that really it works the same way. It's just like a fraction on its side. So if you're comfortable with simplifying fractions, you should become really quickly comfortable with simplifying ratios. So just to put those in words, it's quite clever, isn't it? Here's what I did earlier. Just like fractions, you find the highest common factor for both numbers and then divide them both by it. So in here, the highest common factor was 2, and here, the highest common factor is 2, and we end up with our answer. Just make sure at the end, in case you missed the highest common factor, you always just check your number to make sure, nope, there's nothing else I can divide them by. And if there's not, that means you're done and you have fully simplified it. So that's simplifying ratio. Hopefully nice and quick, not too hard. The next one is a sharing in the ratio or ratio of an amount question. And here's a classic example. There are 30 red and blue sweets in the ratio 2 to 3. How many red and blue sweets are there? And it might just ask how many red, it might just ask how many blue, and there's some even variations where it will give you the red and the blue and ask you to work out the total and things of that nature. But this, hopefully you'll see and you'll get a feel for how it works if we go through it together. So the first step is actually to work out what one share is. And let me talk to you a bit about what shares are. Well, first and foremost, there's a red sweet, or some number of red sweets, and some number of blue sweets. the order they appear in the text actually matters an awful lot. The fact that they said red first means that the 2 is the number of red shares, and the 3 is the number of blue shares. And it would obviously have a big difference if I swapped the red and blue round. It would mean I suddenly had more red or fewer blue. So the order in the passage works, and really my first step always is just to label my ratio. So a 30 red comes first, then there's some number of red and some number of blue, but red comes first and blue comes second. So I label it. The next thing I do, because this is how we're going to split it into shares, is we work out our total number. So we're going to add the 2 and the 3 together. That's this 2 and 3 to work out that we're going to be dealing with 5 shares. That's how many pieces we're going to split our 30 into. The next thing, funnily enough, is to work out the value of one share. What does one share equal? And the way we do that is we take the 30 and we divide it by the 5 shares that we worked out earlier. And what that will do is that will give us the value of one share. Now 30 divided by 5 is 6. So if I wanted to, I could write 6 is one share. In fact, probably the way I would set it out is I would say something like 1 share equals 6. What that means, I can now, if I know that I got 1 share's worth, I can work out any number of shares. So if I needed to work out the total, I would go back and do 6 times 5. In this case, I want to know how many red sweets there are and how many blue sweets there are. Well, for red sweets, because we've labelled clearly our ratio, I know that the red are going to get 2 shares. So red are going to receive 2 times 6, because it's 2 lots of 6, 2 shares. And that's going to equal 12. For blue, I'm going to have 3 shares, and each share is worth 6, so I'm going to have 3 times 6, which gives me 18. So I think I've worked out how many there are. I could choose to represent this underneath this saying, okay, well, that means I've split it into 12 to 18. But equally, it's fine just to say how many sweets you have as follows. But I do just want to check, have I done it correctly? And there's a really handy thing with ratio questions in that you can always check that you've split 30 sweets into 2 piles correctly by doing what? Well, checking that the 2 piles, if you put them back together again, you end up at 30. And if I had 20 pounds and I split it up and I put it back together and I suddenly had 5 pounds, something's gone wrong. So a little check, and I wouldn't necessarily write this out, I might just do it mentally, would be to add my 2 numbers together and just check, do I end up back at the total again? And in this case, if I add 12 and 18, or again here, I add 12 and 18, I do end up back at 30. So I know that I have properly shared out my sweets without mislaying any or accidentally eating any. So that would be how to work out your most basic ratio question. And I think if you can follow that, you'll be fine. And again, you can just write if you want to, I suppose. This would be the total. Quite often with these questions, you'll only be asked to work out 1. So if it did say only work out the red, you just write 12, or blue, you just write 18. Don't make that like a divide there. A little total box at the bottom. Right, everyone. Hopefully that answers a few questions. What we're now going to move on to do is handle some percentage questions. So, percentages. One of the most important things when talking about percentages is to work out what percentage means. Now, I've highlighted cent here, and there's a few words I just want to talk to you about and sort of mention that see if you know what they mean. Well, there's century. There's both a century in time and a century in a certain sport, quite a popular sport. There's a centurion. There's the American cent. There's dollars and cents. What do they all have in common? Well, the answer is 100. A century is 100 years, or in cricket, it's 100 runs. If you look at cents, 100 cents makes $1. Same way we have pennies to a pound. The centurion was a soldier, but he was in charge of 100 men. So cent means 100. One of the other things in math that's really useful, per, I suppose I should colour code this as well, per often means divide. So per cent, really, to me, means divide 100. And that's actually what a percentage is. If I gave you an example and I said, what is 13% equal to? I can, with no trouble at all, say, that is, okay, well, 13, let's write it out, 13 divided by 100. And that's actually how you convert between percentages and fractions. And what's nice is now that we've actually got a division, because that is what a fraction is, that's 13 divided by 100. If we wanted to, we could go one step further and say, okay then, what is 13 divided by 100? Well, I move the decimal place 2 spaces over, so it's 0.13. So percentages, fractions, and decimals are all linked. In fact, we call the topic in maths FDP, fractions and percentages. They often come together, and they're all intimately linked. They mean the same thing. You can convert freely between them. And I think that alone is actually something that a lot of people find a nice thing to know, because lots of people have a favourite. Some people really like fractions, some people like percentages, some people prefer decimals. So it kind of means you can always convert things to whatever you're most comfortable with or whatever is most useful for the question and use that to solve your question. So that's the first thing that's just worth knowing. The percentage means per 100. And again, hope you can see how I've color coded it. Per 100. And from there, you can work out any fraction, any percentage, and back and forth and vice versa. So that's my first useful tidbit, and hopefully that helps, and hopefully it's nice and clear. And we'll see some example questions earlier how you can use this to go back and forth in all directions. Now, the next thing I want us to talk about is how we actually find percentage of an amount. So this is the classic question, find 32% of 120. And even when we're talking about, increases or decreases, the core skill is still going to be finding a percentage, and then maybe as an extension, adding it on or subtracting it. So if you can find percentages of amounts, it unlocks an awful lot of question types. And I'm going to teach you two really useful things. But I'm going to try and help do it a little bit by discovery. So spoilers, I've got them out here. Maybe I could have hidden them away. To find 10%, you divide by 10. And to find 1%, you divide by 100. But I want to talk about A, why those two numbers in particular are useful, because 10 and 1, that's not 32. But also how we can use the logic of what we just talked about to work this out. So actually, if in the moment you kind of forget, you can still get to the same place. Well, the first thing is that any percentage, any number, can be made up of tens and ones. 32 can be made up of a 10%, a 10%, another 10%, and two 1%. So if I can work out 10% and add it together 3 times, and work out 1% and add 2 more of those on, I'll have worked out 32%. And just realizing that you can work out easy percentages and then add them together to make hard percentages is a really good revelation. So we're going to just remember this bit. Maybe we'll copy the, where'd that circle come from? We'll remember this, put it down there maybe because it'll be useful later, that we can split 32% into these. Okay, so I've said we can split into percentages. My rule, and this is something I tell everyone, is just always, relevant to the question, always work out 10% first. It's almost always worth doing. How can we work out 10% of 120 in this case? How can we work out 10% of everything? Well, to answer the question, I want you to just think, what does 10% mean? It means per 100. It means divided by 100. So 10 divided by 100 is a fraction. Fractions can be simplified. So I could simplify this to be 1/10. I like that. So 10% is the same as 1/10. That makes sense to me. And I know how, again, because I'm quite good at my fractions, to work out a tenth of something. How would I do a tenth of 120? Well, the answer is you times by the top, which is 1, which doesn't change it, and you divide by the bottom. So to find a tenth of 120, I divide by 10, and that's nice and easy. Dividing by 10, I can remember that. I can do that with relative ease. It's 12. But I said earlier that these are all equal. They're all equivalently mean the same thing. So that must mean that 10% of 120 is also 12. So I'm also dividing by 10. How cool is that? So this step alone means that, as if you remember that you can convert your percentages to a fraction, you can work out what you have to divide by to get the answer. Now, personally, I actually just recommend, if you learn nothing else today, memorizing that fact. To find 10%, you divide by 10. That alone is going to unlock a lot of questions for you. And the reasoning why is down here. And the reasoning why, as I say, is because 10% is a tenth, and to work out a tenth, you divide by 10. Is that the case for everything? So I've proved to myself that I can work out 10%. Does that mean that 1%, put it down here, that 1% is going to be dividing by 1? Well, it can't be, because dividing by 1 doesn't change it. It's like times it by 1, it's still 120. And if my answer was 120, that means 10% is smaller than 1%. No, that can't work. So it's not just, and this is a mistake we made, it's not just that the number is the number you divide by. It happened to be for 10%, but that's why it's my favourite one to work out, because it's the easiest. 10% divide by 10. How do we prove to ourselves what we divide by with 10? Well, we put it as a fraction form. So how do I convert 1% as a fraction? Well, it's 1 per 100, so it's 1 divided by 100. So in fact, let's write it out. So 1% is the same thing as 1 over 100. Oh, well, I know this. To work out a fraction amount, I times by 1, which doesn't change it, and I divide by 100. So again, by really quickly just converting my fraction, my percentage to a fraction, I can see really clearly what I have to divide by. So tell me, what do I have to divide by to work out 1%? You divide by 100. And again, this is another really useful one to memorize. It's slightly easier to spot from here, because hopefully you can just see without no simplification needed, that look, 1% is the same thing. It's equal to 100th, or 1 over 100. So I divide by 100. Okay, let's do that then together. 1% of 120 is dividing by 100. We saw that down here. So I'm going to move my decimal places 2 spaces over, because it's 2 zeros. So I'm going to end up having 1.2. Well, I've worked out 10%, I've worked out 1%. How was I going to work out 32 again? Ah, yes, it's this down here. I'm going to work out how many, oh, go on, what about you? I'm going to work out how many 10s I need to get to 30 and how many 1s I need to get to 2. And the answer is quite simple. Watch this, I'll try and colour code it. If I know that 10% is 12, 30% must be 3 times bigger, because going from 10 to 30, it's 3 times as much. So does it make sense that if 10% is 12, 30% is going to be 36? Because it's 3 times as much. Oh, that was quite nice and easy. And what about 1%? If 1% is 1.2, does that mean 2% is going to be twice as much? I think it is. So 2% of 120 is going to be 2 lots of 1%. In that case, 1.2 plus 1.2 is 2.4. Color code it so it looks nice and consistent. Well, I didn't want 30 and 2, I wanted 32 together. Hopefully you can spot now that if I then want 32% of 120, do you think I can get it by just adding my 30% and my 2% together? If you do think that, the answer is absolutely correct. 36 plus 2.4 is 38.4. And that means my answer is to what is 32% of 120 is 38.4. So can you see how we've gone about and done it? To start with, and this is almost always the case, work out 10%. Work out 10%. And the reason why is 10% is so malleable. It's really easy to go to 10% to 30%. I just times it by the number I want. It's quite easy to go from 10% to 5% by halving it. Then, if you need to, work out 1%. That's step 1 and step 2. And we know, again, either because we've just memorized that you divide by 10 and divide by 100, or if we need to, worst case, we can remind ourselves by actually just writing it as a fraction and then doing what the fraction tells us, because we know how to do fractions of amounts. Then, multiply or times or divide the fractions we've worked out to work out how many we need. So in this case, work out 30% and 2%. And then finally, add them. So here were our steps. So we worked out 10%, we worked out 1%, we worked out 30 and 2, we added them to make 32. Now, obviously, in other questions, if you were working out 15%, you wouldn't add 30 and 2, you'd add maybe 10 and 5. But that method of starting with 10% and going from there is, for me, by far the best and easiest way. And in particular, it's the easiest because 10% is the easiest one to remember, because to find 10%, you divide by 10. Right, everyone. That's an example. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe worth jotting these down so you've got an example. Hopefully that's useful. What I think we're now going to go on to do is some questions together. So let's put this percentage skills into practice first and foremost. So we're looking at some questions from our Teacher Right workbook. And I believe they're on page 55, and it's the workbook that looks like this, our lovely Teacher Right workbook. And again, these are just to start off with some nice, simple percentage of amount questions. Now, I would love it if all of you would give these a go. What I will do is maybe, and again, you can pause the video here if you want to, have a go yourself. But if you do need a bit of a hint and you're not quite sure where to go, and you've got the book, you can actually go back to the page 54 and read through some really nice, well-written instructions that go into a bit more detail than my quick example there. But I'll actually break up for you the percentages that I want you to work out. So I'll split each of them into the component pieces, like I did here in terms of 10 and 1. I'll talk about some of them and then maybe even go through a couple of examples before giving you the answers. So if you're happy and you want to make a start, you can actually finish the whole page. There are actually 10 questions if you've got the book. But if you do need a bit more help, well, then we'll go through them together. So off you go, make a start. If not, I'm about to give you some clues. Okay, so the first one, question 1, just work out 10%. Don't go any further. My advice to question 2 is to work out 10% and then work out what 5% is. And the way to do that would be to halve whatever 10% is. Then for this one, you're going to need to work out 10%, and from there, double it to work out 20%. I should color code it so it looks obvious it's a different question. So question 3, work out 10, then 20. For number 4, I would actually work out 10%, 5%, and 30%. And then from some combination of those, you'll be able to get to your answer. And for the final one at the bottom, you could work out 10%, or using the trick I showed you earlier, try and work out what fraction 50% is and see if you can get that way. So either work out 10% and from there work out 50%, or if you want to, try and have a think about what fraction is, and I'll reveal the answer to you. Okay, again guys, now that you've got those hints, if you want to again pause the video and carry on, otherwise let's do some answers together. Okay, answers coming up. Don't peek unless you want to know the answer. So very quickly, 10%, we learnt from earlier that to find 10%, we divide by 10. So 10% of 80 is 8. This one, 10% of 60 is 6, which means 5% is half that, so 3. And from 10% of 5%, I can add that together to make 15. So my final answer for this one is actually 9, because I'm adding both numbers together. For this one here, 20% of 120, well, 10% is 12. So that means 20% is twice as much, so 24. And that means my answer then is 24 because that's what I needed. I wanted to stop there. I could work at 25%. For number 4, I always start with 10%. So 10% is going to be 20. 5% is half that, so it will be 10. And 30% will be 3 times as much as 10%, so that's 60. And now actually it's these two here that are combined together. Maybe I should say it's these two that combine to make the 9. Well, these two here, the 30 and the 5, that are going to combine together to make 70, which is my answer for number 4. So I'm adding 30 and 5 to make 35%. Finally then, for number 50, obviously 10% could be 150. And then you end up with timesing it by 5, and 150 times 5 is 750. Or, I said you could do this one, and this is another one that might be worth learning, but again, if you can work out the fraction form, 50% is going to be the same as 50 over 100. And if you look here, what does that simplify down to? It simplifies down to half. So what we've actually done here is work out half of 1500. So if you chose to, you could have equally done half of 1500, which also equals, final answer, 750. However you got there is perfectly correct. Okay, gang, the other half of the questions, questions 6 through 10, and here's a little handy tip that might come in useful. So again, have a think, work out. If you're feeling confident, you might start wanting to use things like 50% if you can get straight there straight away. Again, if you want no hints, pause the video, start now. If not, again, I'll give you some advice onto the kind of things I might split it into. There's no wrong or right answers, there's just some things that are easier than others. I suggest giving that a go now. Right, everyone, you're still here. I presume you want some hints. So for maybe 50%, there's a couple of options. Again, I'm always going to start working out 10%, but I might also try and work out 50%. Or just jump straight to 70%. There's a few ways of doing that one. But if you worked out 50, you could then do 50% plus 2 10%, or from 10% you can jump straight to 70%, whichever's easiest for you. For number 5, again, I'm going to work out 10%, and whatever that answer is, I'm going to halve it for 5%. For 6%, the way I would do it is I'm going to work out 10%, because 10% very quickly gets me to 5%. And then if I add 5% and 1%, I'm going to have an answer. Keep my color coding going. For 23%, so for number 9, I'll do that down here. For 23%, I'd work out 10% and 1%. I think that's all you need to start. From there, though, you can work out maybe 20%, 3%, things like that. And then for number 10, 46%, again, I'm going to start by working out 10%, 5%, and 1%. And there's a way to go from these numbers to 46, but I might let you try and suss what you have to do with these last two. Right, everyone, off you go, and when you're ready to come back, ask me for some help or check the answers, we'll go through them together. Pause the video if you need to, otherwise I'm going to assume you want the answers. Okay, so 70%, so 10% of 3,000 is 300. 50%, when we worked out earlier that it's half. So you might have just said, okay, well, half is going to be 1,500, which means that 70% is either going to be 300 times 7 or 1,500 plus 300 plus 300. Either way, the answer should be 2,100. So final answer, 2,100. Again, for 5%, the best way to start is to do 10%. 10% of 300 is 30, and half of that is 15. So the answer is 15. For 6%, again, I still would work out 10% as a starting point. It's going to be 90. Then half of 90 is 45, which is giving me my 5%. 1% we said was dividing by 100, so that means it's 9. And then from these to here, if I combine my 1% and my 5%, that will get me to 6%, which means I just have to add the two of these together. So I'm going to be at 54 as a final answer. I appear to have changed my color coding somewhat. For number 9, starts to get a bit harder, more like the level of difficulty that was in that first example. But again, let's do it. 10% is 15. 1% is 1.5. And if you wanted to, you might work out the intermediaries. So you might work out what 20% is and what 3% is. Because if you work out those two, you can add up your answers. So how do I work? 10 to 20 is double, so that's going to be 30. And 1 to 3 is times by 3, so that's 4.5. So as a final answer, 23%. It's going to be these two added together, so 34.5 is my answer. And then last one, 46, biggest one to finish on. Again though, 10% works the same way. I'm going to work out, green, I'm going to work out 80. From that I can work out 5 really quickly because it's just half, so that's 40. From there, 1% is going to be divided by 10. You can either, with 1%, you can divide the 800 by 100, or you can divide the 10% version by 10, because actually if you look at the difference between here is 10 and 10. From here now, what do I need? Well, I could work out 40 and 6, but actually another way of doing this, which is just equally as cool, and maybe this you prefer this, how many 10% make up 80? Well, there's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 10%, so that's my 40. Then I need a 5%, so I add my 40 on. Then I need the 1% to add my 8. So if you prefer to, you can actually add it out like this, and that's going to lead you to your answer. So we've got 8 plus 8 is 16, plus another 8, 24, plus another 8, 32, then plus 40, 36. So final answer, 368. But again, just so you can check for completeness, if you did want to work it out and you worked out that 40% was this, you know, 40% should have equaled 320. And you could have said maybe that 6% is going to be 5% plus 1%, so it equals 48. And then added those two together to get 46%. Either way. Right, guys and girls, fantastic effort. That was enough. And again, useful tip for our little Billy. It's full of useful tidbits in our little book. That goes over percentages and a few examples. Hopefully that was really useful. We're going to come back and cover more of these topics in block 4, get more practice, but I thought it was a really lovely opportunity for us to practice this now. If you have the Teacher Right numeracy book, what you can actually go and do is carry on to the next page and look through the timed test questions. And I've got answers here, and I'm more than willing to go through with you. But otherwise, if you finish there, if you've not got the rest of the book, that's absolutely fine. That really, as a core skill, is a fantastic thing to learn. So, the time test is on page 46, for those who are going to join in with me. Just remember, with the timed text, I think this is timed test, it's really important. They're a bit more wordy, they're trying to catch you up, but those core skills you've learned are still very, very applicable. The only thing that might extend it a little bit and make it a bit harder is when they start asking you to increase or decrease by a percentage. And all you've got to really work out there is if you're going to increase by 10%, you work out what 10% is using the exact same methods we have here. And then once you've done that, just add it on. And if you're going to decrease by 10%, work out what 10% is and take it away. So there's just one step further, but really, as long as you can work out the percentage, I'm quite happy for now. That's a really good starting point. I think you'll be able to work it out and puzzle them out yourselves, or certainly give them a go. So here are the questions. Again, I've actually got the answers up, so maybe I should hide those just a moment. Have a work through, see how you feel, and then when you're ready, come back and we can go through them together. Okay, so if you're here with me, hopefully you're ready to go through the answers. So the answers to 1 was B and 2 was C. And again, if 2% were absent, you've got to work out what 2% is and take it away. So that's where our answer of B has come from. And actually, if we apply it now real quick, let's do it. 1% is what I'd work out to begin with, which is dividing by 100 is 2. Therefore, 2% will be 4. And so now all I'm doing is 200 take away 4 to get my answer. Looking at number 2, there are 600 books, 180 were non-fiction, the rest were fiction. What percentage is books? We did talk about this. If 180 of the books were fiction, how many were non-fiction? Well, I don't know. How about we do 600, take away the books that were non-fiction, and whatever's left then surely must be the ones that are fiction. So let's do it. 600 take away 180 is 420. And now we know how many books there are that are fiction. Percentage of fiction books. Well, 420 out of 600 of the books are fiction. That's a fraction. And we talked about earlier how fractions and decimals and percentages are the same thing. So does that mean I can just convert my fraction to being out of 100 and go straight to percentage? Well, yes, it does. So if we look here, if I can get it out of 100, whatever number's on top is going to be my percentage. So how do I go from 600 to 100? Well, the answer is, of course, to divide by 6. So I do the same here and divide this by 6. I can do 420 divided by 6. Now 42 divided by 6 is 7. So then 420 divided by 6 is going to be 70. And the second you see this, something out of 100 and you want to have it as a percentage, you just write 70%. Because percentage means out of 100. That's what it means. So that question, different, but an application of those things we were talking about earlier, where you can sort of rearrange. If you know how many fiction books are, you can work out how many non-fiction books there are. And then as soon as you have it as a fraction, you can go from your fraction to your percentage. And that's the way to do it. Right, let's go 3 and 4. So a mahogany table costs £120 and you need to add 20% VAT. That is just a fancy way of saying add 20%. So what's the real price? Let's put that there so we can see nicely and clearly. In fact, let's just hide. What can I do? Hide that one. Yeah, get that out of the way. So what do I have to do? Work out 20%. So again, 10% is going to be 12, which means 20% is going to be 24. So now 120 plus the 10%, which is 24, will equal my new price of £144. So that's just an example of an extension, a little bit further than what we've covered before, about using percentages to work out values. In a science test, Catherine scored 60 out of 80. What's her score as a percentage? Well, I want to get it eventually to be out of 100. I can't see any really easy way of getting straight there, going straight from 80 to 100. So how about I do an intermediate fraction? How about I do it out of 10? Well, I can do that. 80 divided by 8 gets me to 10. So then I can do 60 divided by 8. Is this going to work nicely? Not too bad. 7.5. And then I can really quickly spot here to go from 10 to 100. I'm going to times by 10. So 7.5 times by 10 equals 75%. And the second I see this, I immediately go bang, 75%. So as soon as this is written, it's out of 100. Whatever's on top is the percentage. So that's a couple of worked examples. Let's keep going. Let's see if any more we need. So in this one, all that's different is we're going to work out what 25% of the value is, and then we're going to subtract it. So 25% is going to be 40. So we're just doing 160 subtract 40. For number 6, it will increase by 15%. So if we've got 30, we first work out what 15% is. So 15% is going to be £45. And that means we're now just adding 300 to 45. We can add all that. Number 7, Henry bought a car for £4,200, but made some repairs. He sold it for 21% more than he purchased it for. So now again, look, we need to know what is 21%. So we need to work out what 10% is, what 1% is, add them together. So slightly harder numbers now, but it's the same skill. So 21% is 882. And we have to just add that on to end up having 5,082. Add that onto the original amount. So add those two values together. Let's put that up there. That kind of goes with that one. Number 8, a hospital contains 320 beds. If 25% are empty, how many are being used? Well, again, that's another way of saying what is 25%. So what is 25%? Well, 25 is going to be 10%, which is 32, plus another 10%, which is another 32, plus half of that, which is 16. So I get about 80 beds being empty, and then we got to do 320 minus the number 80 minus the number we had. So sorry, I should have written this down, but so if 25% equals 80, our answer is going to be 320 minus 80, which equals 240. So just adding on that one little step. Number 9, in a cash ISA account, you earn interest of 4%. So that's a way of saying you gain 4% more. So what is 4%? Well, 1% is going to be 18. So 18 times 4 is going to be 72. We've got to add on 72. So the answer is 1,872. Seems quite nice. A laptop computer costs £1,100. And again, it's gone up by 5%, or it's reduced by 5%, so we need to work out 5%. Again, 1% is 11, times by 5 is 55. And now, because it's been reduced, it's like the opposite of increase, we take it away. So 1,100, take away 55 is 1,045. That's where our answer comes from. Again, if you're getting the hang of this now, I'm sure. Barry decided to invest this much money and earn 8% interest. So again, that's a sign of it going up. So what is 8%? Well, 8% is going to be 1% times 8, or 5% plus 1% plus 1% plus 1% to get there. But however you do, 8% of 3,500 should have been 280. And then, since that's what we're gaining, we're adding on. Oh, well, it's just in fact even easier. It just says how much interest does he receive. So there you go, 280. We didn't even have to do the add. They obviously do that bit for us. Number 12 is where it starts to get a bit tricky, because it starts to sort of arc back to the last style of question. So Susanna's hourly wage rises from £7.20 to £7.92. So it's gone from here to here. So how much money is she actually earning extra? Well, it's the difference between 20 and 90, so it's actually 72p more. Now, the way to represent this as a percentage is that means what is her percentage increase? Well, that means what is her amount of money as a percentage out of what she was already earning. So it's going to be what is 72 pennies out of her already wage, which is this. And if I was to make it easy for myself, I would do it as pennies as well. It's like saying, what's 72p out of 720? And if you simplify that down to 100, what you'll find is that you can divide both of these by 72. Excuse me, both of these by 72. And sorry, I've not done that again. It's 1 out of 10 divided by 72. And then bear in mind, as we want it to be as a percentage, so that means out of 100, 1 out of 10 is 10 out of 100. And as soon as you add up 100, you can just immediately write 10%. So the answer is 10%, because 7.72 pennies out of the 720 pennies per hour she was earning is 10%. So her money is you'd say she's earning 10% more than she used to. So let's just make that look a bit neater. So that was how we worked out her increase. So it was a difference between the two. So first work out the increase, and that's where this 72 came from, and then divide it by her original amount, her total, and then work out whatever that fraction is as a percentage, and that's the increase. Number 13, cheeseburger, chips and a drink costs $4.50, but from tomorrow cost will increase by 10%. So what is 10%? Well, again, I would convert this to pennies. So it's 450 pennies, which means it's now 45p. And so we now have to increase it by 10%. So add on 45p to get £4.95. It's a real shame if you like your burgers and your chips. They cost a bit more. A colony of 300 penguins was depleted by 7% due to severe weather. It's very sad. It means they passed on. So 7% have gotten lost or disappeared or gone to warmer climes. So again, we have to work out what 7% is. Depleted means take it away. So again, you could do 1% and times it by 7, but 300, 7% of 300 is 21. And so now we're now losing 21 penguins. So it's going to be 300 minus 21, which will give us the 279. A lot of the skills here are just about learning the different ways, depleted, decreased, interest, increased, all the different words they can use that mean either going up or down. Final one then, big one. The Smith family purchased a house for £250,000 5 years ago. They sell it for £450,000. What's the percentage increase? It's a big one. So it's the difference between the two. So it's 25000. The difference between this number and this number. So we know that in maths, the difference means take away, which is going to be 200,000. And that's the increase. So it's 200,000 out of, or divided by, the amount of money that it started as, the original. And again, this is a fraction. We want to get it eventually out of 100. So first off, I'm going to divide by all these zeros, get a bit closer. So you can see there, I've got 20 out of 25. So can I see if I've got 20 out of 25? Because again, I've just simplified by dividing by 10,000. How can I now get it out of 100? Hopefully you can spot that 25 times by 4 will get me to 100. So if I times by 4 here, that's the equivalent to 80 out of 100. And as soon as you see that, you can write 80% increase, which is a fantastic increase. Would that my things could do that. Okay, everybody. That really covers all I wanted to run through with you today in terms of the material. There's quite a lot there. Now, I know we only sort of very briefly touched upon ratio, but we're going to do both ratio and percentage again at a later date. And it's just a really nice opportunity now for us to actually go through, ask a few questions, and give you a bit like a sort of a taster, a starter on some of these questions. And you see there's quite a lot of variations of these different styles of questions, and we will eventually, over the course of the year, see them all. So please don't worry. It's just because these are new, potentially difficult, especially if you've not done them at school, it's a lovely chance for us this week just to get a bit more of a head start and do a little bit more practice. So hopefully that was appreciated. I certainly appreciate you guys stopping by. In terms of the homeworks, just a reminder, the exam content must come first. So if you've not yet done your exam for week 6, please do so, and that comes before all the homework, because it's really important on week 6, if we're going to review the exam, that you've already done it. You don't want to be reviewing an exam you haven't done. That's going to be incredibly boring, and devalue the practice you get from doing the exam. Then, of course, usual homework, as per usual, under the You Must section. And if you can do both, fantastic. If you have to do only the exam and some of the homework, then that's fine. Again, exam comes first. Keep an eye out for the English videos, where we'll go through the English in a similar manner. But hopefully that was useful. Lovely having you, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Stay safe.